We're joined with U.S. Congressman from Iowa's 3rd Congressional District, Zach Nunn. Appreciate you being here. We got two big topics that we're talking about today. So just over the noon hour, Dr. Roberts' attorney releasing more information from their end. I first want to start with your work in getting the final removal order from ICE and the federal government. Just walk me through that, as it's been a busy last several days.
Well, Zach, I think you know the entire state of Iowa is really reeling from the situation of the superintendent of Des Moines Public Schools being detained by law enforcement. We moved immediately to provide the most transparent and comprehensive list of factual information that we had. And that included a FOIA request to both Homeland Security, Department of Justice, ICE under DHS, to be able to get source documents. And I think this is important for every Iowan to know that they have real information that they can make their best assessment from. What we were able to get from the Department of Justice clearly lays out a removal order that was issued in May of 2024 by an immigration judge to say that Roberts in this case was not only no longer in visa status, but he'd been in violation of it for quite some time, and this was his final appeal. He was a no-show, and as a result, they issued a deportation order. At that point, we also know a couple of things. One, he's not a U.S. citizen. Two, that he had been in an immigration status for some time. And three, it then opens up the question, at what point was there a breakdown in this system? And so while we've hunted for transparency at the federal level, the next step is also accountable actions here at the local level.
I mentioned that his attorney, holding a press conference over the noon hour, had a letter from his previous attorney down in Texas saying that they had notification in late March of 2025 that the case, his immigration case, was closed. There was a successful resolution. I know that just happened several hours ago. But I guess, what do you make of that from their end, their argument?
Yeah, no, look, here's the situation. As we start moving out, I think we need to understand why this individual felt the necessity to not just lie to the school board, but to lie to members of our community, how he was able to hide in plain sight even after a deportation order had already been issued. And these questions are going to be right there for his attorneys as well to understand where did they fail in helping him through a process. And Zach, I'll be the first to say, let's be empathetic to people who want to come here and be here the right way. My office has helped over 800 individuals just in the 3rd District navigate a complex system. This individual never came to us, and his attorneys never came to anyone. In fact, what we're finding is more and more information leads us to believe that this was a series of misinformation being provided to us. Everything from being registered to vote in Maryland, having a false Social Security number, not receiving his doctorate, and floating on the reputation that he might be able to get it. These are very concerning and now have put us in an even more challenging position to take care of families and communities who are asking legitimate questions. How is this person in a position of public trust, and where were the safeguards to have addressed this so it never would have happened? Because now we're at a point where we're a year into this and we have cost the taxpayers a lot of money, and we've cost the public trust a lot of faith that the system can continue to work. My goal right now is to continue to be in this fact-finding mode and provide as many transparent documents as possible. I need the school board to come alongside and do the same.
Just to add here, the attorney did not talk about, he says they have knowledge of immigration status, just weren't privy to share it, how a Social Security number was obtained, not willing to share it. Trident International, they had said during their background check that they believe that he had received the PhD from there, but still kind of working to confirm information, as you are alluding to. So there's some stuff that they weren't able to comment on. I want to ask about the United States Department of Justice opening an investigation into DMPS for race-based employment practices. That also just happened quite literally an hour ago. What are your thoughts about that? The largest public school district in the state that's in your congressional district, your thoughts on this as all this news is fluid right now?
So DOJ right now is opening an investigation under Section 7 that basically Des Moines Public School, the charge goes, decided to make a hiring based on race, not based on merit. Here's what I know. The Department of Justice is going to open this investigation, but what we have seen in this case alone, the Des Moines Public Schools have been behind the power curve at every step of this process, in validating who he was, in confirming their own search firm's findings, in understanding that once this individual was identified as not being a U.S. citizen, it was actually Roberts who resigned. It was not the school board who fired him. I expect, and I think Iowans expect, that our elected leaders are going to be proactive in not only finding truth, but holding people accountable. And at this point, the school board has been only in reactionary mode. I need them to step up. Iowans want them to step up and find out, how did this happen? One, so it doesn't happen again, but two, so that we don't have this albatross around the state of Iowa in an otherwise great public school system that's failed to answer some really basic questions on how did an illegal alien become the head of Des Moines Public Schools?
So the Board of Educational Examiners also conducted a background check. I want to point out the Des Moines School Board said yesterday that they had to wait for that license, his administrator license, to be revoked in order to place him on unpaid administrative leave. I don't know if you know about that, or how, public funded school, they have a process for terminations, for firings. I don't know how quickly that they would be able to act on that, as they themselves said that they were seeking more information from you and from the federal government, which led them to the decision.
Well, we provided clear indications that this was not a U.S. citizen. He should never have been hired in the first place, seeing as he had no visa status and had a deportation order. That was provided clearly by the Department of Justice just within the last days. That alone should have been enough to terminate his employment. Hiding behind, other reviews, I think, is really a shortcoming in leadership. And so let me be clear, I applaud the state of Iowa for stepping forward directly and saying that we're going to revoke his license. I also want to give a huge compliment to our law enforcement here who executed in the right way. And there's been a lot of shade thrown at our local law enforcement for executing on a Biden-era deportation order that has been sitting out there. At this point, everything that we've seen from the indications, both within law enforcement, ICE, DOJ, and Homeland Security, indicate that these officers executed bravely and prevented the situation from escalating after he fled from law enforcement.
Just a couple last questions on this topic, and then I want to shift over to the shutdown. What needs to happen at a federal government level for communication down to the state when this, when they're trying to give Dr. Roberts a license, something that can be accessible to a third party that the public school board used to be able to hire him in the first place? What type of communication needs to happen? Are you frustrated that there wasn't notification from the federal government to the state, to the public school board that, hey, there is a final removal order in 2024 May? I
absolutely am. In fact, I think this is what's indicative of a broken immigration system here in the country. Look, we were elected on the belief that 10 million illegal individuals coming into this country over the last 4 years was something that we could crack down on. It's one of the reasons we led legislation for the tightest border security bill in history. And as a result, we've seen illegal numbers come down substantially. But we also recognize we've got to fix the immigration challenges on this side of the border. That means helping folks who want to come here the right way, whether it's in ag or whether it's in a profession, have a pathway to do that. But what we can't have is a broken immigration system that allows an individual like this to hide in plain sight, a district that does apparent due diligence but then is exposed time and time again as having not done basic things, confirming someone's educational status, confirming someone's citizen status, or at least looking into their visa status and flagging that. At a minimum, Des Moines Public Schools should have known that he was here in a temporary visa status and should have been checking back. I'm leading legislation at the federal level, though, to make sure that this information is provided in a timely fashion so that any employer should be a partner with us, not in competition with the federal government. I hope that our local leaders stand up and do the same thing, because at this point, we don't want to ever see this happen again in any community across the country.
I guess just a quick follow-up. So, for example, there's the Federal SAVE Act that's trying. People register to vote. They check a box affirming that they are a United States citizen. If that's not true, they can be held liable later. But it's more so just saying that you are. There's not really checking against that. The Federal SAVE Act would give access to the SAVE list for the states to be able to affirm those that are here legally but undocumented, that are not citizens.
That's right.
Not undocumented, but that are not citizens. Excuse me. Would something like that, for employment, like an I-9 employment form, because from what I'm aware, it is just checking a box affirming that you are a United States citizen, and there's not really else to dig on that.
Well, and Zach, I think there's multiple things we need to look after here. One, how does someone register to vote in Maryland and have no federal check on this? How does someone who's not a U.S. citizen acquire a firearm and not have the ability to be checked back? How does someone become a superintendent without an I-9 background check confirming they're a U.S. citizen? There's a series of events here which have led to this tragedy that we've seen play out all in one individual. But if it's happening here for this individual, it is certainly happening by the millions across this country. So there is absolutely a federal nexus for responsibility, and I'm taking legislation to hold that accountable. But there's equally a responsibility both at the local and the employer level to make sure that they've done everything in their best interest of their students, this community, and clearly that was not being done.
I do have one more to ask about.
Yeah,
this topic.
absolutely.
You have a lot of protests going on from students. I know there is walkouts going on today, which is Tuesday afternoon. What would you communicate to those that you represent in your district, whether they're students, whether they're parents that are here, that are immigrants, that are here coming through the proper channels, but are just more overall concerned that the superintendent of their district was detained by ICE, just the general fears about that? What would you communicate to them?
First of all, I am not unempathetic to the fact that, Dr. Roberts, somebody who I had met before, did a lot of good as an individual, and that should not undermine the fact that, the work he did here in Des Moines Public Schools deserves recognition. But we also can't sugarcoat the fact that he took and made a number of very poor decisions, ones that not only endangered him, but have now potentially cost the careers and the professionalism of Des Moines Public Schools. For those students, for those community members who are seeking to come to terms emotionally with it, I want to also be able to provide the best possible factual information. And this is why we've been so keen on transparency at the federal level. We're asking from the same at the local level. But the next phase of this is going to be an accountability issue as well. When individuals break the law, when entities do not enforce the law, when people who want to come here the right way are put behind people who come here the wrong way, lie about it, commit fraud, commit felonies, that's resources we're spending on the bad actors. I want to take those resources and spend them on the good actors who want to have a pathway to be here. So for any family who is questioning, do I have a pathway to be a U.S. citizen? The answer is yes. Let's do it the right way. For any community member who feels hurt by this, you deserve answers, and you have a right to be frustrated, particularly when someone has lied to you. And for our overall education system, I want to make sure that Des Moines Public Schools has some of the best leadership possible. And that means not shortchanging it by just getting someone who is either expedited in, or as this Department of Justice investigation may identify, was done by DEI versus actually putting somebody in there who is committed, but also had the proper paperwork done to be able to execute on this.
You mentioned spending. Let's talk. It's coined the shutdown showdown right now. There's a continuing resolution that sits in the United States Senate after passing through, called the upper chamber, lower chamber.
That's right.
I won't argue with that. I won't mince words about that. Do you think that this shutdown will actually happen tonight, or is this who blinks first contest?
Zach, this is a situation that never should have happened in the first place. The House has done our job. We've been able to pass a continuing resolution so we can continue to work on appropriations and budget bills as DC is supposed to function, as every family that balances a checkbook expects it to do. But the reality is this: while we got Democratic support and overwhelming Republican support in the House, it's been sitting in the Senate now for more than a week. The Senate has brought it up and voted by a majority, 54 votes, including Republicans and a Democrat, to be able to move this budget forward. But there is a holdout, a small number of Democrats in the Senate who refuse to vote for anything that doesn't include an additional $1.5 trillion in spending. That is not what we agreed to. It was a clean CR so we can get our budget done. If they want to have a discussion on new spending, take it up in the appropriations process. Don't hold the country hostage so that you can have a negotiation point. We're going to give Democrats another opportunity today to be able to vote on this. Now, they want to have more negotiations. Guess what? We have 3 months until the end of the year. What we shouldn't be doing is trying to cram these negotiations into the next 3 hours, because that's unfair to the American people, and it's certainly not a good use of taxpayer dollars. And Zach, I'll be very specific here. If I'll call it the Schumer shutdown, the Democrat in charge of the Senate, who's more scared of his primary opponent than he is being loyal to the American people, that means 3 million Iowans are going to not be able to get through TSA the next time they want to go fly starting after tonight. That means 15,000 Iowa National Guardsmen are going to go without pay, including 2,000 who are currently serving on the front lines in the Middle East. There is no reason that DC's dysfunction should result in a frontline troop not getting his or her paycheck when they're on the literal front line of defending this nation.
How concerned are you if the government does shut down? Quoting back to 2018, the last shutdown, I believe it was 35 days, $3 billion was lost against the economy in the fourth quarter of 2018, $8 billion in the first quarter of 2019. Now, those gains were made back. How much will be lost if the government is shut down?
The Democrats' approach to this shutdown is a hard shutdown, no battle plan forward. And I think that is going to be catastrophic to the economy. I think that they believe that somehow they will be able to help with their extreme left base, but they're going to leave the other 80% of the country behind in order to achieve a little bit of popularity back home. That is the wrong way to just do public policy. Whether Biden or Trump were president, I've always supported making sure that we pay our bills on time, particularly to those Americans who deserve it. I also want to emphasize here that this does not have to be this way. We have the ability to make sure that individuals on Medicaid and SNAP and veterans benefits continue to get paid. It's one of the reasons I'm leading the Pay Our Troops bill, so that even if the federal government shuts down, we still pay our troops. They can't even help us bring that to the table. This is clearly short-term thinking by a few who are going to harm all of us. And this is no longer just a Republican or Democratic issue. This is a Senate shutdown that is coming from folks who feel like they've painted themselves into a corner and they don't have a plan to get the country back on track.
Talking about subsidies, that's what a lot of the Democrats are being held up on in the Senate. There was a farmer last week that we were talking to concerned about his premiums going up $3,000 more per year. Just to be clear, Senate Democrats want to add some cuts the big beautiful bill did to the ACA Act. What is your concern for Iowa farmers if the government doesn't shut down and premiums are going to go up?
Well, first and foremost, for that farmer, we've been able to get him $13,000 in tax cuts through the bill that we've already passed. The $3,000 potential, that's a December issue. We're talking about a tonight issue. And let me be very specific here. If this shuts down, farmers in Iowa will experience some of the best harvest yields ever, but we're going to have fewer USDA loans being executed at a time where farmers need it most. We're going to have more farmers with fewer markets in which they're able to sell. We're going to have a federal system which is completely closed off, meaning our ability to move forward. My legislation on year-round E15 comes to a screeching halt. Equally important, our opportunity to expand trade routes overseas. A third of all Iowa ag, half of all of our soybeans that are going to be harvested this month and next month are going to try and hit the market when the U.S. doesn't have the opportunity to expand the good work we've already done on new markets here because we'll have a shutdown. So the value add for farmers, the proposition for rural America, and the cost to this entire country will go up exponentially, all because Schumer's shutdown doesn't have an off switch and they don't have a plan to be able to help ag right here in Iowa.
Just last couple here for you. I know you got to get going. You are going back to D.C. tonight, but is there, it is the ball's in the Senate court, Senate Democrats court specifically. There's nothing that would be able to be negotiated on that would be bounced back to the House to then be able to avoid a government shutdown. I guess, is that how you're viewing it? And then to add on to that, what Republican responsibility is there in the shutdown, if any? I know people on the right are framing it as, just as politics go, a shutdown. People on the right are going to frame it as the left shutdown, and when the left's in control, they'll put it on the right. I guess, what's the Republican responsibility?
Well, this is a unique situation. This is a situation in which the president now has called in the Democrats twice to the White House. He's given them the opportunity to say, what is it you actually want? And the answer from them have been all over the map. There is not a clear and concise answer from any one Democrat. So it's not that you're dealing just with Schumer, you're dealing with 47 Democrats who all have their own idea of what they want to do. The second aspect of this is the House has passed a comprehensive clean CR, just saying let's continue to have this negotiation, but let's not shut the government down. There's no negotiation on that. Either you agree with it or you don't. And some Democrats have come over and voted with us. So truly it is the bipartisan solution here. In the Senate, they have the opportunity tonight to vote again. And I applaud Leader Thune in the Senate for taking this up and saying, we're going to give you one more opportunity to have this conversation. But it seems like, challengingly, the leadership in the Senate has responded to their most left base and would rather have a shutdown to make a point to them. And we've seen this before. Schumer was nearly, primaried the last time he tried to work with Republicans. This is, again, not a red or a blue issue. This is a green issue. Do we want our economy to grow, or do we want to put a hard stop on our ability to succeed as a nation?
All right, Congressman Zach Nunn, thanks for taking the time. A lot on two issues there, so I appreciate the thorough conversation.
Zach, thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it, brother. Yep.